Hello, matriculants. Today we'll be discussing A Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden, a British poet. I hope you enjoyed. Let's get into it. So looking at the title of the poem, Funeral Blues, the word funeral, it's usually a ceremonial service held shortly after a person's death, usually including the person's burial or cremation. The word blues usually is a genre of sad and slow music. So let's just go over stanza 1, line 1. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the piano and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. So in line 1 to 4, there seems to be a series of commands or imperatives directing the world to cease activity and attend to this death. Clearly, it is not possible to stop time, so the figure of speech being used here is a hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. So what I normally tell my learners is when somebody is hysterical and you'll get to say to them, don't get so hyper, it's a kind of a clue to remember what the figure of speech hyperbole means. So it's an exaggeration. So in line 1, stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone. So easily accessible imagery, the use of modern everyday objects is being used here in the formal setting of the elegy. Line 2, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Line 3, silence the pianos and with muffled drums. So the first 3 lines build tension and the climax is in the 4th line. The words muffled drum, line 3, so what muffled drums are, they are drums that are beaten and are covered with a wet cloth to minimize the sound and make it suitable for the sad occasion. So it doesn't have the usual loud thumping sound. Line 4, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. So line 4, the speaker prepares himself for the funeral to commence. The word silence in line 3, sorry, I forgot to mention that. The speaker, it's a male, wants or needs the world to acknowledge this death with respect. So you usually hear people say, let's have a moment of silence, and that is to show respect for the dead or for the moment or the event that's being commemorated. Moving on to stanza 2, lines 5 and 6. Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows around the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. So in stanza 2, lines 5 to 6, the poet begins with imagery of skywriting. So I've got an image of what skywriting looks like. The poet wants the world to know about the great death. So a form of advertising. He wants the world to know that his friend or his lover has passed. So scribbling on the sky, the message, he is dead. So in line 6, the word he has a capital H and dead a capital D. So the capital H and D states the importance of the deceased to the poet, or it could be anyone who has suffered a loss of a loved one. Line 7 and 8, put crepe bows. So crepe bows is usually the crinkled type of wrapping paper. So put crepe bows around the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. So black is usually a color to symbolize death. So line 7 and 8, the crepe bows, the public doves. The poet wants a public ceremony, public recognition. And it is continued in the phrase black cotton gloves. Poet wants visible commemoration. On to stanza 3, line 9. He was my north, my south, my east and west. So over here, the repetition of the word my indicates how important the deceased was to the poet. The deceased is compared to a compass. So this is a metaphor. and I've included a picture of the compass, indicates that the deceased meant the whole world to the poet, and it gave him purpose and direction to be in a relationship with the deceased. Line 10, my working week and my Sunday rest. So in line 10, contrast of working and of rest is being made here. He was central to the poet both when the poet was working and on his off days. It also emphasizes the amount of time that was spent with each other. Line 11, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. Line 11, the deceased defines the poet's sense of time. The contrast between noon and midnight, human speech was defined through the lover. So the contrast, talk and song, the companionship they shared was as well during entertainment, during fun times. So he had companionship with the deceased as well as entertainment. Line 12, I thought that love would last forever. Colon, I was wrong. So the phrase, I thought that love would last forever, line 12, the poet was naive perhaps, in thinking nothing could take away his happiness, but death did, and he realizes it now. The colon, it places emphasis on the second part of the brutal contrast. The phrase, I was wrong. In line 12, the end part, the tension is broken by a short, simple sentence, I was wrong. This is an anticlimax to the romantic idea, showing the poet's disappointment at the loss of the deceased. So moving on to stanza 4, line 13, the stars are not wanted now, put out everyone. The words stars, moon, and sun, they're all romantic symbols. They're also symbols of time. Not wanted. This is another figure of speech hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. Put out everyone. The poet is asking the impossible, hyperbole, to emphasize the new sense of mourning he's feeling, of great loss, of futility or pessimism that he is experiencing. Line 14, pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Line 14 is another example of the figure of speech hyperbole, the request for the impossible. It continues with pack up the moon, dismantle the sun. These are romantic symbols. Once again, the poet has no interest in love anymore. The poet returns to the imperative states of commanding, as in stanza 1, and referring to day and nighttime. Line 15, pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. Another example of hyperbole, pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, continues asking for the impossible. Oceans and wood represent the land and the sea. He wants it all to disappear as he is at a deep loss. So usually when we are going through a mourning or a deep loss for a loved one, things that once held great pleasure to us no longer does, or at least for the phase we are going through, for the time phase we are going through. We only see despair, we only see the loss and the great longing for the loved one. That is all that we can see. Line 16, for nothing now can ever come to any good. So in the final line, there is a simple and harsh conclusion. It shows the pessimism of the grieving poet. The end stopped to create a sense of finality or of truth. So it's important to note that the entire stanza creates a powerful sense of loss of meaning to the poet's life. So moving on to our summary, the poet W.H. Auden is a British poet. This is the style of classical elegy, though it features is informal language and objects of everyday life such as a telephone. The poem appears from the perspective of a man, seemingly the poet himself, deeply mourning the loss of a friend, lover who has died. I must make a note here that it seems that many learners, many matriculants in the past have made the assumption that this is a woman talking, a woman referring to her male companion. In this case, it is actually a male talking about his male companion. The first two stanzas are about the poet's desire for the public to acknowledge this death. The final two stanzas are about his own private reaction to the loss. He begins by calling for silence from the everyday objects of life, the telephone and the clocks, the pianos, drums, and animals nearby. He wants life of his lover, seemingly a normal average man, to be proclaimed to the world as noble and valuable. He wants aeroplanes to write the message he is dead in the sky, crepe bows around doves, and traffic policemen wearing black gloves. What seems unbearable to him is the thought that this man's passing from life to death will be unmarked by anyone other than the poet himself. The poem Funeral Blues is a lament for a friend or lover. Another word for lament is an elegy. Blues is an American term for a sad song or a sad type of genre. Blue is a color that we associate with sadness.